Hi all, in this video we take a closer look at Golem Crafting. The ability to craft Golem followers was added with Chapter 3 of Age of Sorcery as a permanent feature. Golems can be customized with various parts and can be used to fight alongside you and assist you with the gathering of resources. So how do we get started? In order to learn this new profession, you have to visit Master Carver Huang at Mechamose's Spire in the Exile Lands, or at the camp of the castaways on the Isle of Sipta. Talk to him and learn the Golem constructor knowledge. Once learned, you can find the new knowledge and associated recipes under the sorcery category of your knowledge page. The Golem constructor knowledge itself teaches you two new stations, the Guardian Assembly station and the Golem workbench, as well as the ability to animate a golem. Do note that there are several additional knowledge recipes that must be unlocked with knowledge points. They are all tied to crafting Golem parts, which can be of different quality and type. Both the Guardian Assembly station and the Golem workbench can be crafted with the construction hammer. The Golem workbench is where you can craft the Golem parts. Once you have unlocked the various recipes, you can see them listed in the crafting menu on the right hand side. At the moment, there is no dedicated crafter that can be placed into the bench. It remains to be seen if that gets changed with later updates. We think that sorcerers could be a perfect fit. After all, Golem construction is listed under sorcery. That would also give the name sorcerers further purpose. Let's talk about Golem parts first. A Golem can have 6 parts in total: a torso, head, 2 arms and 2 legs. Funnily enough, you can craft a Golem without a head or without both arms. However, the latter would in particular make a Golem pretty much useless. Strangely enough, crafting a Golem with only 1 arm is not possible. Oh, and Golems with 1 or no legs aren't an option either. Currently there are 3 tiers of Golem parts: stone, iron and crystalline. While you can craft all basic parts for the stone and iron tier, basic crystalline parts must either be bought or found as loot. With basic parts, we are referring to parts that have no special added functionality. Furthermore, all tiers can be used in combination when crafting a Golem. You don't need to use parts from the same tier when assembling one. In addition to other resources, all basic stone and iron parts require blood crystals to craft. Then there are tool arms, as well as tar and brimstone coated parts for all 3 tiers. These can all be crafted at the Golem workbench, but require the basic parts amongst other resources. Tool arms are an upgrade of a basic empty arm, making it functional for fighting and gathering of specific resources. We'll go through all the current functional arms in a minute. The tool arm will always be a right arm, and the left arm has to be an empty one. To that effect, you cannot craft a Golem with 2 tool arms nor 2 empty arms. Another craftable part is the explosive Guardian head, and like the tar and brimstone coated parts, it adds some functionality to your Golem. The tar coated parts drop tar pools that can be ignited. The brimstone coated parts cause the Golem to release a toxic gas cloud upon being hit. Be careful though, the poison also affects you. And the explosive jarhead detonates upon death of the Golem. Beyond the basic crystalline parts, there are a couple of other special parts you can either find as loot or purchase from a merchant. For example, the Lotus Burner Torso allows you to add lotus flowers or powder, which will provide various buffs when your golem is on follow and in range. We made a separate guide on the topic of the Lotus Burner Torso that you might want to check out. Another item is the Radium Guardian Head that emits light in a cone in front of the golem. We're not sure how useful this really is, considering your golem might not always be right beside you when on follow, but at least it looks good when parking your golem at your base. And last but not least, there is also the Lightning Rod Head that attracts lightning strikes. When we tested it, the golems seemed to absorb the one or the other strike without taking damage. On the topic of where various golem parts drop, we have found them in wooden and large chests throughout the world and in dungeons, as drop from sorcerers, random mini-bosses and bosses, as well as loot in Kurak's mini-dungeon. For now, the only merchant that sells golem parts is Master Carver 1. Parts cost 200 blood crystals and the item rotation on sale is on a 10-hour cooldown. And on single player 2 hours. Since the cost is quite steep and you also need blood crystals to craft various items, it might be more efficient to hunt for parts via loot drops. While you can't use the illusion system for golem parts, there are additional cosmetic versions of the golem parts and related workstations that can be obtained via the Battle Pass and Bazaar. And we also expect Funcom to add new functional items with future ages. Okay, so how do we assemble a golem? First off, you need to craft the Guardian Assembly Station. Depending on which parts you select, the armor, HP, damage and inventory size of your golem will change accordingly. Here's an overview of golems using either only stone, iron or crystalline parts. Note that only the torso has an impact on inventory size. And here's an overview of all tool arms per tier. To assemble the golem, select the Animate Guardian option. This ritual takes a few seconds, and like casting spells, it also gives you a small amount of corruption. Note that once your golem is assembled, you won't be able to switch parts anymore. The assembly is final. While your golems can be assigned orders the same as human followers, they can't wear any additional gear, and most importantly, they can't be healed. Once they lose all their HP, they are gone for good. While they can't be healed, their HP is quite substantial, and they have a passive deflection mechanic as natural defense. Furthermore, golems are also getting boosted by authority, and perks that would usually heal a follower boost their deflection instead. In case you were wondering, golems count as regular followers and you can have one golem following you at a time, or 2 golems with the War Party perk in authority. Let's talk about one important weakness all golems have, and that's a vulnerability to star metal. Not only can attacks from star metal weapons never be deflected, but weapons of this type also have an 8 times damage multiplier against golems. One last thing in regards to combat. While golems do fight by your side, we have sometimes observed them doing mostly single normal and heavy attacks. That said, other times they have performed combos, and presumably they should, so this might be a bug of some sorts. Finally, should your golem die, don't forget to harvest it with a pickaxe to get some resources back. Unfortunately, you won't get back any of the individual golem parts, but at least some blood crystals. Now back to the current gathering types. All golems can fight by your side, no matter which tool arm is equipped, but depending on the type, your golem can also gather different resources. The scythe arm is the equivalent of a sickle and can therefore harvest anything from plants to gossamer. The axe arm equals a hatchet and is ideal for wood, flesh and other animal parts. The maul arm is the same as a pick and your go-to tool for stone, ore and bark. And finally, the sword arm. It functions as a skinning knife and you guessed it, it's perfect for skinning. Would not be surprised if new arm types will be added with H's or future updates. In order for your golem to gather resources, you need to add a target resource into its harvest inventory. This also allows you to control what your golem harvests. By adding specific resources into the harvest inventory of your golem, it will then actively search and gather those resources. For example, stone. Once you take the resources out of the harvest inventory, golems will stop to harvest. They will also stop to harvest when their inventory is full. If you can't move a specific resource into these slots, it means the golem can't harvest them. This system might not be 100% reliable though, as we tested this with Grey Lotus and it still accepted it, despite there not being any harvestable plants of this type. Furthermore, in case you wonder if a resource requires a certain mechanic to be harvested, like for instance star metal, your golem won't be able to harvest it unless the shell has been cracked and the star metal is accessible. Speaking of star metal, unrelated to the actual items used to craft your golem, all golems utilize tools of the star metal tier when harvesting. That tools are on par with star metal also means that you as a player would get a lot more resources by gathering with better tools or harvesting perks. It would be a crime to let your golems harvest more valuable resources. Unfortunately, golems are not harvesting resources fully autonomously. While they don't need to be on follow, they only do so as long as you are in their vicinity. Funcom said that they might be able to harvest without the range limitation in the future, but only time will tell. In relation to that, they also won't venture too far away from you. It sometimes feels like we had to bring them closer to the resource or resources as to get them going where we wanted them to start. One last thing in regards to resource gathering. We cannot confirm if the harvesting perks have any effect on golems, as this would be extremely difficult to test. Before we wrap up, and in case you were wondering, yes, we can confirm that golems can use emotes. However, this only works when not in guard or attack mode, and sadly their tool arms often make them look rather silly. You can also rename your golems, but for now this is affected by yet another small bug, as the names seem to reset frequently. We for one experienced it every time after a server restart. And that's all for our guide. If you like what we do and would love to see more, give us a thumbs up, subscribe and hit that bell.